Rob changed the course of my life.
Rob, as smart as he was very naive in many areas. I had great admiration for her. Michele was an organizer. Michele took care of business. She was a great producer.
And during COVID, Albert says Michele produced weekly Shabbat celebrations on Zoom.
If there is anyone qualified to give their assessment on Nick, on his culpability and on his competency, or maybe the best person is a fellow drug addict. Enter Danny Svilar. Danny shared a room at a $60,000 per month luxury rehab clinic with Nick in Malibu, California, when they were both 15 years old. According to Danny, the Reiners did everything they could for Nick, who, certainly based on Danny's description, sounds both seriously entitled and seriously ungrateful. In fact, not mincing words, Danny has described Nick as an entitled monster.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear. Thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Entitled monster, what does that actually mean? Well, doesn't it mean that no matter what you do, it's never enough? Someone is always wanting more, and they're never happy with what you do for them. Danny also says that Nick ranted even then about how much, quote, he hated his fucking parents. Now, I'm not sure if it's fair to square 15-year-old Nick with 32-year-old Nick. Many teenagers go through a rebellious phase where they also hate their parents, but they change. But did Nick? How many of us are still carbon copies of our former teenage selves? But was Nick? I do think there's a case to be made that Nick didn't get very far in life, beyond rehab, and so perhaps if Nick's only interest was drugs, and it was always drugs, and that's his defining feature, then why wouldn't 32-year-old Nick be a carbon copy of 15-year-old Nick? And wasn't that the problem? According to Radar, Svilar, 32, a recovering shopping addict, told the Daily Mail, he, meaning Nick, just had really oppressed anger towards the fame. And that's something that he repeats later on, that Nick's huge gripe was with the fame, all the attention that his family were getting. And I guess in a way you could say that was being taken away from him, or he wasn't getting that. And then he goes on to say, I don't know how it is having a father with that level of fame, but regardless of that, Nick had no sense of gratitude, no sense of appreciation. He was just a fucking pompous little punk. He just wanted to be out smoking pot, doing pills, doing whatever, and his family just wanted him to get help. And one does almost get the sense that Nick seemed to realize, wow, we special, we really wealthy, and so I have a license to, I can expect to. It's sort of my birthright that I can have whatever I want. And so why can't I get whatever I want, whenever I want? He sounds like a typical drug addict, doesn't he? Selfish, hedonistic, and not having a bone of self-discipline in his body. According to Radar, Svilar claims that he met Nick at a California rehab facility in the summer of 2009 after his mom, that's Svilar's mom, staged an intervention after he racked up, get this, $250,000 on his father's credit card. Now, okay, if I may, I just want to say someone who steals that much due to a shopping addiction, calling someone else entitled, I don't know, maybe that's more than a little pot calling the kettle black, wouldn't you agree? Anywho, Danny explained, Nick was my first roommate. From the get-go, he was pretty welcoming, pretty funny, but at the same time there was this side to him which could just like flip. Now, we need to consider this aspect of his personality as a teenager. Quick to anger, easily triggered, and ask ourselves whether that has anything to do with mental illness, or does that have more to do with this kid's personality of a spoiled brat who isn't taught to honor boundaries, and we know Nick wasn't. Another thing, I think when someone always gets what they want, and when what they want is drugs, and they don't actually learn control, they don't learn to control or manage or mitigate their own emotions, Instead, they become slaves to it. And when those feelings, those emotions demand to be fed copious amounts of drugs, and you always get what you want, and those demands are always met, what do they do to people who might stand in their way, including parents?
Men rise and fall like the winter wheat.
According to Radar, Svilar said that he witnessed Nick attack another teen at the facility, and on one occasion the Nepo baby directed his rage towards him, resulting in their separation. When what was the big deal? I compared him to looking like John Travolta's son that died, and that set him off, Svilar said, referring to the actor's late son, Jet Travolta. Maybe that was cutting a bit too close to home. So there is an example of just words setting Nick off. And so you can see that he is quick to anger and is aggressive and is violent within the context of drugs or not even being on drugs. He goes on to say, we had good rapport at first, but then I was like, oh my God, that's who you remind me of. And it turned ugly after that. He definitely tried to get aggressive with me. He tried to get physical, and then a tech had to step in. He was getting into my face and raising a fist. During his first days at the center, Svilar said he would talk to Nick before they fell asleep each night. We would talk at night after lights were out, and some of the things that he would say really threw me the wrong way, he said. And the thing that made an impression then, we hear it over and over again, is Nick's anger towards his parents, especially his father. Svilar told how Nick's attitude enraged him because, unlike many of the teenage addicts in the facility, the director's son had parents who evidently cared about him very much. So this is a strange case where other addicts are turning to drugs because they sort of don't feel the love or the attention from their parents, whereas Nick does, but he turns to drugs anyway. Anyway, Svilar explained, the parents of these children with money, they usually are not truly involved in wanting to help them or do this or that. They have a hired hand, basically being their handler, if you will. Lots of the kids in there had absent parents who relied on nannies. But Rob and Michele were there for every single family group. They were there for every therapy session. You really get the sense that they were loving parents. So what was Nick's problem? I think Nick's problem was Nick. They didn't have to give me the time of day. I played Frisbee with Rob Reiner, for God's sake. They just wanted to get him well. Yet, evidently this wasn't enough for Nick. Svilar added, I would hate to see him try to plead this guilty or not guilty by insanity, when in reality he told me how much he fucking hated his parents, especially his father. Now again, I would be cautious drawing too much from an encounter 15, 16, whatever years ago, but it is interesting that Danny witnessed Nick's disturbia, arguably Nick's true nature, when he was still technically mentally healthy. In other words, before drugs really messed with his head. He goes on to say he really truly had no cause to hate them, except for the fact that they are the reason for a lot of his problems, and that boiled down to the fame. That was something his parents had that he didn't, and it was something they couldn't give him. And it was something he couldn't apparently earn on his own, certainly not in the Being Charlie movie. Is it because they were famous and loved and he wasn't? Did Nick want the warm and fuzzy embrace of the fame of the masses? And when that was out of reach, he relied on drugs instead and fed the fires of jealous resentment while he was at it. Well, if Nick wanted fame, he has finally gotten what he wanted. Well, I'm not going to take it further than that. Please have a look at my coverage of the Elizabeth Smart documentary on Netflix, and do watch it if you haven't already. It's really interesting. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.